All right, folks. We're going to go ahead and start getting into things today. Thank you for being here for our PASFAS Lunch and Learn, sponsored by our Mass Save PASFAS and All Electric Training Program. I'm Aaron Gunnarsson with PHIUS. I recognize most of your names. I'm sure you recognize me as well. On your screen is James Ortega from PHIUS, who will be our presenter today for our session on the PHIUS path to certification for multifamily buildings. So before we jump into James's portion, I do want to give credit to Mass Save and the PASFAS and All Electric Training Program. Sure most of you are familiar with it by now. It's been around for, well, the passive house part of it's been around for about 4 years, and the all electric part now for about a year. But thanks to the sponsors and Mass Save down there on your screen. And here's the incentives for those who may be new to this. The 1 to 4 unit incentives are on your screen now. These incentivize moving buildings to be all electric. For buildings that are 5 units or more, these large multifamily buildings, obviously this program has been around for a while. We now have over 10,000 units registered in this programming. I think about 40% of them currently are low income or affordable housing projects. So a wide range of projects, tons of them enrolled. Great to see. So I'm sure you're all aware of this, but thanks to Mass Save for offering these programs. As a reminder, Mass Save also is offered a 50% reimbursement on certification trainings for individuals, for professionals. So if you want to go through the passive house, the FIAS certified builder training, the FIAS certified consultant training, or the FIAS certified verifier training, all those you can get 50% off registration for. But I'm going to turn things over now to our feature presenter, James Ortega from FIAS. But thanks for being here, and James, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aaron. Welcome, everyone. Again, I am James Ortega. I am the project certification manager for FIAS. I've been there for about coming up on 8 years this year, and I'm here today to talk to you about our multifamily certification program and go into some of the things that make FIAS a little bit different and what these types of projects start to look like. So if you are currently a CPHC from FIAS, this is worth 1 CEU for you. There'll be a self-report code at the end, but we're going to go through what is FIAS, review some passive building principles and dynamics, go through the certification process about getting started, what design certification looks like, final certification, and then end with some additional resources. So in general, what is FIAS? We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're trying to drastically reduce the contributions of buildings, energy consumption through passive building metrics. So in our efforts to do that, we train professionals, as Aaron mentioned. We have consultant training, builder training, and verifier training. We certify products like windows and ventilator systems, and we also certify buildings and maintain our own certification standard for those buildings. All of that is kind of pulled together by the FIAS Alliance, which is our membership branch, and basically helps to bring people together in different communities and help them work together on these projects and kind of, bounce ideas off of each other, meet the competition, meet friends, meet allies, that kind of stuff. So these are all projects we have certified over the past 20 odd years or so. They range from single family up to multifamily. But yeah, in general, we don't just certify houses. Multifamily is what this segment is about, and many of our projects are multifamily. Specifically, affordable housing has grown really significantly over the past few years, but we're starting to see more high-rise multifamily that are, of the market rate variety as well. So passive building principles, these are the main ones that I'm going to talk about. They apply to all sorts of buildings. So thermal control, radiation control, air control, and then working on minimizing and making our mechanical systems more efficient. So from a thermal control perspective, we're trying to make our insulation as continuous and non-broken as possible. Radiation control is working on optimizing windows and solar gains. We're not trying to maximize our solar gains, especially on these larger multifamily projects, because those densely populated high internal gain buildings can lead to overheating potential, which we want to avoid. Air control is a combination of making the envelope airtight to reduce infiltration and exfiltration, which can help with a lot of things. And then as an add-on to that, we're also, now that we've made the building so airtight, we're not getting outdoor air through the walls anymore. We have to introduce balanced ventilation with heat recovery to provide outdoor air to folks. And then we're trying to introduce the heat recovery to reduce the impact on the energy use of the building. The mechanical systems piece, I feel like, is not only a resultant of all of the good practices we've employed to the building envelope, but also a good way to reduce energy use is to make those systems more efficient. So besides the quantitative pieces of passive building, which include, energy reduction and, those types of things that are going to help save money for the building and for the developer and for the people living in it, we also have some qualitative pieces. So comfort, interior health, safety, durability, resilience, all of these things are also delivered with our passive building standard as part of making our projects more energy efficient. These are kind of the things that are less often talked about, a little bit harder to quantify, but very real things that are delivered to occupants. So going into our certification requirements, we have them kind of split into two halves here. I've got it kind of listing the passive conservation metrics and then the active conservation metrics. And there's a few of them listed here that I'm going to go through kind of piece by piece to kind of wrap everybody's heads around what we're talking about. So from a passive conservation perspective, we have heating and cooling limits that have been optimized for cost, energy use, climate, building type, occupant density, dwelling unit density, and we have a specific calculator that we use to kind of determine what these targets should be. And again, because they're optimized for all of these different pieces, we really feel like we have developed a standard that's really special and really works well, especially for the North American market, and it responds to not only the building type, so if it's a multifamily or a single family building, it also responds to occupant density and dwelling unit density. So it's trying to take a look at some of these projects, which a typical maybe market rate multifamily building could have a spread of studios, one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom apartments. That type of building might have a little bit different feel than maybe an affordable project that's all studios or something like that, where it's even more densely populated. So looking at these optimized heating and cooling limits is kind of our main metric through the passive conservation metrics that help inform, how much insulation you need, how good of windows do you need, et cetera. Air tightness and moisture design, keeping those are in line are critical for both building durability and occupant comfort. We have specific air tightness requirements that are tested on site and have to be met for our final certification process. And then moisture design is all about keeping the assemblies durable over the long time lifespan of the building, not introducing moisture into the walls, making sure these buildings and their assemblies last as long as possible. Window comfort is part of the comfort criteria we have. It's based on window height and climate. So depending on where the building's located, we're looking at the ASHRAE 99% design temperature, and then depending on how tall that window is what kind of informs this limit. So it's basically a maximum U value, or the window can be only so bad depending on the climate and the window height. So again, this is kind of going back to one of our qualitative pieces that we've assigned a quantitative limit to, which is for window comfort. Our active conservation metrics are limiting the source energy of the project, or how much energy the building uses overall. For multifamily buildings, it's based on occupant density and dwelling unit density. And our calculator that I mentioned earlier also kind of determines what this target should be. I'll talk a little bit later. We have two different certification paths. We have FIUS Core and FIUS Zero, which I'll go into a little bit more in depth about what this means in terms of the source energy limit. Third-party on-site inspection and quality assurance is a really important piece of our certification process. We're relying on prerequisite programs like Energy Star, Indoor Air Plus, and Zero Energy Ready Homes to build off of some of the things that they've already developed, so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel on these pieces that we find are very important to ensure the buildings perform well, and that the on-site inspection and quality assurance is really designed to make sure that the owner, the developer, who's ever building the project is getting what they paid for. So our certification guidebook has a reference here to all of these prerequisite programs and how we build on those with our program. Electrification and electric vehicle charging infrastructure are two pieces that we've added to the PHIUS 2021 standard, which is our newest and most current iteration. We're basically trying to get as many buildings ready to be electrified as possible. So if you're doing any kind of a fossil fuel combustion equipment, you are required to introduce panel space for an electric version of that equipment in the future. And where there is parking planned, we require electric vehicle charging infrastructure to be either ready or available at some point in the future. So we're not requiring these things up front, but we do want to plan for the future. And that is definitely pieces that I think will be important with making our buildings last longer and making them more valuable over their lifespan. The last piece is renewable energy, which kind of ties into all of these other parts that we've looked at. So we do allow renewable energy to help offset the active conservation and help meet the source energy target for our projects. We have a few options available for renewable energy. So we're looking at on-site PV or on-site renewables directly on the building or the site. Looking at directly owned offsite, there's community solar options, virtual power purchase agreements, and then renewable energy certificates. All of these are options that we look to try and help not only the buildings perform better, but incentivize the grid to get cleaner as well. So getting started, early on, we're looking at building a team, looking at the paths and the requirements. We kind of covered the requirements already. So from our perspective and the teams we're looking at creating, first and foremost would be a FIA certified consultant or a CPHC. They're really highly recommended. You want to involve this individual early. They take care of the energy modeling. They can help inform the design decisions, and they're our primary contact when the project is going through certification. A FIAS certified builder is also highly recommended. They're not a required piece of the puzzle, but if you can find a builder who is familiar and understands the goals of the project, either way, they're going to be a really invaluable asset to the building and the success of the project. They help maintain quality and oversight and really ensure that the documentation provided is going to actually get built on site as it's expected to. The verifier is the last piece. This is the person that is the on-site quality assurance. They are required to be there to take photo documentation. We recommend early involvement so that they can work on testing plans, ensure that the builder is communicating with them about different stages of the building during construction. They do the site visits and inspections and then verify compliance with our prerequisite programs as well as FIUS's specific requirements for on-site verification. They also correspond with us, but at the tail end of the project, when construction has been completed and is finished. So our website has kind of this is the location to look for what our two standards are currently. So we have a FIUS core standard, and then we have a FIUS zero standard. The core standard is looking at on-site conservation through passive and active strategies to meet a difficult but manageable source energy target. FIUS zero is looking at building on that on-site conservation and active strategies. In addition, we're providing energy and renewable energy to help bring the building down to basically a net zero building. So graphically, we start with like a baseline or a code building. We use all of our passive and active conservation strategies to create a FIUS core project. And then on top of that, we're putting renewables to bring the project's energy use down to zero on a net annual basis. So that's kind of the two main paths we have. The next stage I'm going to look at is a little bit more about the certification process in general. It is a two-part process. So we have design certification, which happens while the project is being designed. We look at an energy model to verify compliance that is reviewed by certification staff. And this process is iterative. We're looking at and trying to help the project team develop the project throughout design development and construction documents. This isn't a process that we necessarily want to see after construction documents have been completed, because at that stage, if there are any issues with the certification design or anything like that, it's really difficult to change those types of things. So we typically like to see projects earlier in design and then have the project teams check in with us and have us review their projects as it's being designed, rather than kind of a Hail Mary at the end and hoping that, okay, at the end, I hope we're going to pass. The second half of the certification process is final certification. So this is the on-site quality assurance done by the verifier. PHIUS reviews their documentation, and then we align the energy model that was approved during design certification with any as-built changes that might have been made. So if we changed out an insulation type or stuff like that, we're going to pull in the actual blower door test results. We're going to see the actual ventilation values from the commissioning of the ventilation system. All of these pieces get reviewed and absorbed into the final energy model, and then final certification is issued after that. So our process, we really like to recommend, it's an optional stage, but starting out with a feasibility study to determine if certification is worth it for the project. If you're in one of the communities in Massachusetts that's adopting the opt-in stretch code, this is something that definitely is worth doing. There are incentives for feasibility studies that they're providing. And this is basically PHIUS's snapshot check to help the project team, especially early in design, to see if certification is going to be indeed a path that seems reasonable and is worth it for them. We create a preliminary energy model for your building design used to assess the current design, its feasibility to meet our performance targets. We try to keep these relatively inexpensive and try and have a turnaround time that's reasonably quick, so the project teams can make decisions early in the process. It includes an energy model. We've got preliminary reports about the annual energy use, and we typically create two cases when we're doing our feasibility studies through PHIUS. We have a baseline case, which would be looking at a code compliant version of the building, and then looking at, okay, what would it take in terms of improved R values, improved U values, better air tightness, et cetera, to meet the PHIUS targets. And we always end these feasibility studies with a 1-hour call to kind of go through with the project team if there are any questions, going over what next steps might be, and then generally reviewing the findings that were done during the feasibility study itself. Assuming that feasibility study went well and the project team wants to move forward, the next phase is paperwork and just getting the project registered. So this is a quote and contract request from our submit a project page. And the project is considered registered after the invoice is paid and the contract is signed. At that point, the project will be listed and will be listed as registered on the PHIUS website. And you can move into actually the certification process, which is the design reviews, which I mentioned earlier. So this part is where I'm going to go into a little bit more about what this iterative process might look like, what the things we require, some of them specific for multifamily. But in general, we're looking for the certified passive house consultant to work with PHIUS, upload documentation for us to review. PHIUS reviews and provides feedback. The CPHC reviews the feedback, makes any changes requested, gives more clarification and information, and then rinse and repeat until the project has been lined up and all of the documentation, the drawings, the submittals align with the energy model that was provided and is meeting the targets. After that point, design certification is issued by PHIUS, and an official letter is provided, and the website is updated to include a design certification date shown for that specific project. So a little bit more about this design certification. We'll look at an overview of the documentation we look at. So compliance tool or the energy model, looking at the drawings, takeoffs, and submittals, talk about a few supplemental tools, and then we'll touch briefly on the PHIUS feedback form, which is the end all be all and basically where We track changes, where we track additional pieces of information that either need clarification or more info. And so with our compliance tool, we are working with Woofy Passive, which is a software specifically used for PHIUS certification process. It is a mean monthly energy balance tool. So rather than doing a dynamic simulation that looks at hourly data, this tool looks at individual days or 1 month per day, basically, to try and create really fast results that are also compliant with our certification goals. The pieces that build off of and we check against this energy model are drawings and takeoffs. So design drawings, obviously these typically come from the architect and the engineers. We need to see building plans, sections, elevations. We want to see mechanical, electrical, plumbing drawings, all of these things that make a building come together. Takeoff drawings are typically prepared by the CPHC, and these help us to basically tell quickly and not have to be on the actual design team when developing the building, and get the information communicated to PHIUS in an orderly and quick manner, so that we can double check and make sure that things look correct as they've been developed. Drawings and takeoffs continued here. Detail drawings are a big piece of what we review during certification. We're looking here at trying to make sure that there aren't going to be obvious thermal bridges, trying to include that continuous thermal boundary as much as possible. This is also where we're looking to try to mitigate moisture concerns up front during the design, and trying to make sure that air tightness details look like they're going to actually perform in the site. So all of these pieces are critical when going through the design certification process. And you can see, like, okay, if I sent all of these drawings, 2 months after we've gotten permit and after construction documentation has been completed, that's really late in the process to be able to try to make any changes or mitigate any potential concerns that you might see in the field later. Mechanical drawings are the next piece that I'm going to touch briefly on here. The main things we're looking at with mechanical drawings are looking at what is the ventilation layout, making sure that the rooms that are being provided with supply of outdoor air and exhausted line up between the energy model and the drawings, making sure that the heating and cooling systems are sized properly and are going to distribute the heating and cooling properly, and making sure that basically the mechanical system as a whole is going to perform how we're expecting it to, and aligns with the energy model we're providing. This is part of that active conservation piece, where the efficiencies of these systems have a big impact on the source energy of the individual projects. Submittals, this is kind of the next piece. This is looking at basis of design documents. We want to know insulation types and basis of design for the heating and cooling equipment, for the ventilation equipment, trying to look at the critical pieces here, like windows, which are a big factor in all of our certified projects. We do have a list of certified windows on the PHIUS project, or on the product page on our website. And I think we're going to be launching our new version of this window database in the next month or so. So right now it's kind of a list, but in the future it will be kind of a searchable, filterable list, which is going to be, I think, really helpful for project teams to go and find windows that might be a good basis of design for during the certification process. The next page is supplemental tools that we use and look at. These are all specific, some of them more specific for multifamily, but all of them are really helpful. So we're looking at a multifamily lighting and miscellaneous electric load calculator. This is a tool that we use to determine how much lighting and plug loads are going to be used in the building, which is helping to determine internal heat gains for the building and total energy use. We have both a calculator and a webinar available on our website at the moment for this specific tool. The window comfort and condensation risk assessment calculator, I mentioned that earlier in the presentation as well. We have a webinar and a calculator for this too, which is helpful for helping to read that tool and make sure you're understanding the results. We have a multiple heat pump calculator, which also helps determine durations when you have certain performance values given for air source heat pumps. We have a calculator available on the website, which is useful, especially for multifamily projects with a lot of outdoor systems, not just one centralized heat pump system. We have domestic hot water distribution layouts and entries. There's a diagram and a webinar series that kind of help CPHC specifically to document the hot water piping network that's being proposed for the different buildings. And then we have a frame U-value estimator, which I'm flagging here as really helpful for project teams when they're working on a multifamily project that's got a storefront or something like that that doesn't necessarily have typical punch windows that might be listed on the window product page of PHIUS's website. But if you do have data from NFRC, for example, and then you can coordinate with the manufacturer and determine the glass type, this calculator is really helpful to pull out the granular data that we need for our energy modeling purposes. In addition to those tools, we also do use Therm, which is created by LBNL, which is looking to determine and quantify potential thermal bridges in projects. And then we can also use WFI Pro, which is a hydrothermal risk analysis tool, which looks at moisture mitigation within wall assemblies. We have prescriptive requirements to try to mitigate thermal bridging and to try to mitigate any hydrothermal risk, but every project is unique, and lots of times there are specific details that may not quite comply with our prescriptive requirements. So we have this option to use this performance path here, which allows you to create an analysis and make sure that there's not going to be issues in the long run for either of these situations. The last piece I'm going to touch briefly on is about our feedback form, our process. So this is it's a Excel file. It has all of the documentation reviewed kind of line by line, and PHIUS approves and provides direction on all of the inputs within our energy model software. We're expecting the CPHC to provide responses and give either additional clarifications or ask additional questions that they might have about comments that were previously provided, or things that the project team is dealing with internally and needs to get a second opinion on. So this feedback form is really what holds all of the information regarding the project and how we move it forward through the design reviews. Talking about timelines for design certification, I think, is important to get people on the same page about what they can expect. So because our process is iterative, we do have kind of different timelines for each round of review. So our first round of review would be submitted, and PHIUS will ensure that we get feedback within 6 to 8 weeks of that first round of review submitted. Second round reviews is 4 to 6 weeks after it's been submitted back to us, and then 2 to 4, and then 1 to 2 for every round after that. Most of our project teams at this point in the multifamily sector are finishing their design certification within 3 to 4 rounds of design review. There are a couple stragglers that sometimes take a little bit longer, but typically that's what we're seeing. We do have an expedite design review schedule available. It is an additional fee, but we return feedback for every single round of review within 5 to 8 business days. And I will note here that this is something that's at our discretion. We do sometimes get overloaded, and if we have too many projects asking for expedite review, at some point we just simply can't keep to this schedule. But we will let project teams know in advance if this option is available upon request. In general, our typical time frame from when a project has completed the contract, paid for certification, to when design certification is issued is about 12 to 16 months. And that's based off of real data that we've accumulated over the past 3 years. This is multifamily specific data. And keep in mind that this does include basically the entire design process that most of these projects go to, because we do tend to see projects submitting early in design phase, and it can take some time, but this also does include any time that it takes between rounds of review where the project team is working on updates, working on details, etc., that need to be resolved before they can resubmit the project for PHIUS's review. The last phase of the certification process is about the on-site review. So this is the verifier performing their on-site visits, getting their documentation together, providing it for PHIUS's review. We do have a similar bit of an iterative process here. PHIUS does have to review the documents if we have any clarifying questions. We also include that in a feedback form to ask the rater for additional clarification or to point us to where they've made an upload or what other documentation they might potentially be missing. That is typically, again, repeated until we've got everything that we need to fully certify the building. At that point, after final certification is issued, a plaque and a certificate will be sent to the project team. And the project, as far as PHIUS is concerned, is fully certified and is going to perform as we're expecting it to. So that final certification process, I'll go into a little bit more in depth as well. This is looking at our co-requisite programs, reviewing the as-built documentation and what we're expecting to see there, looking at the quality assurance reports that the verifier creates, and then PHIUS's feedback process, again, is similar to the design review, but most of the things are set in stone now, right? The building has literally been built. It's going to be completed. Most of the clarifying feedback that we're asking for is either, something wasn't uploaded to the proper location, or we couldn't find a photo documentation of something, or we have a clarifying question because a result looks strange or something like that. So our co-requisite programs are kind of built on this high performance staircase. So we're building off of what the IECC requires on Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready homes, and then building PHIUS's specific requirements off of those pieces. So in addition to those Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready homes, which I mentioned, we also require EPA Indoor Air Plus certification, which is helping to ensure indoor air quality. And we're building off with our other pieces with these programs as well. The good thing about building off of these co-requisite programs is that we have many quality professionals available to us that are already familiar with them. The HERS program has raters who can help understand this information, and we have kind of built off of the HERS program with our on-site verification certification for PHIUS verifiers to kind of help, especially with multifamily projects that have many of the same dwelling unit requirements as those other programs have. Our as-built documentation we're looking for, it's exterior photos, it's interior photos, it's site shading, it's all of these things that go into what is actually happening around the building. We see infrared photos, we want to see appliances and systems to ensure that what was designed was actually installed, and looking at making sure that the insulated assemblies and the windows and the doors were installed properly and look like they're going to perform well. So that's all pieces that is accumulated by the verifier. In addition to this documentation, they're also responsible for conducting the blower door test. They need to be on site to view and participate in the commissioning of the ventilation and the heating and cooling systems. The verifier is a really, really important piece on site for these projects. All of that documentation, those verifiers are expected to distill into workbooks and quality assurance, quality control reports for PHIUS to review and kind of go through and look at what the building is in terms of these reports. We have our qualifications, and our Appendix E kind of lists all of the scheduling recommendations, testing protocols, and definitions that the verifiers will need to review when they're going through this process. And then again, before final certification is awarded, we are aligning that energy model with the quality assurance workbook and whatever documentation the rater recorded that might have changed between design certification and final certification. Those examples include updating the final air tightness test and basically incorporating any other changes we might see during construction itself. For our review timeline for final certification, it's a lot faster. Again, there's not as much documentation to review because much of it is already set in stone, literally. So our document review, we basically look and see after the verifier has uploaded documentation, we respond within 3 business days to let them know if we see anything major that's missing or hasn't been reported to us. And then after that documentation review has been completed and we've confirmed we have what we need, we return our feedback for a full review within 1 to 2 weeks. And that basically kind of goes throughout until the project is fully certified. Our typical time frame from when design certification is issued to final certification is about 16 to 24 months based on our historical data we have. And this is a long time, and it's because it includes construction time. So typically that design certification is should be issued before construction is started, and final certification is after it's been completed and the verifier has gotten all of their on-site documentation together. So for additional resources and trainings, we have a few of them. I know that Aaron has already mentioned a few, but we have trainings for consultants, builders, raters, and verifiers. Raters and verifiers are just 2 different pieces of the quality assurance process. Raters are typically for single-family homes, while verifiers are for commercial and multifamily projects. We do have all of these are available for live on demand, which basically means that they're going to be live virtual for the online sessions. We do have a couple of trainings planned, I think specifically for builders that are hoping to be in person in the next few months, which is always good. And I think builders enjoy that in-person training. So we are expecting to see a couple of live actual in-person trainings in the future. Otherwise, we do have Woofy Passive software training. We have it for beginners, advanced single family, and then I'm going to highlight the advanced multifamily training that we have. It's a 8 hours total course. It's 2 days of live virtual training, and you're working with CPHCs who have done multifamily projects before as our trainers, and you can really be helpful not only in the modeling, but you can also ask them questions about their process for certifying and any questions and insight they might have to offer from the perspective of the CPHC on a multifamily building in general. The last couple plugs I will make here is for the PHIUS Alliance. So again, we have this as a membership option for groups. We have chapters all over the US and one in Canada, and we are looking to try to grow this and help people help find each other and help each other. So that is kind of where we are at. And I'm going to go back through the chat very quickly to see if there are any questions, because I got through this pretty quickly, Aaron. Sorry about that, but that is my long and short of the presentation at this point. I do have a last slide in here, which I'll save for a minute to see if I can answer any questions before we keep going.
Yeah, great. Thanks, James. So thanks for putting all that together. So folks, please use the chat room to ask questions, or you can use the raise hand feature that Zoom has, and you can ask your question directly. Right now, we have one in the chat from Diane. If a project is looking to meet the zero on-site power, does it need to meet the site or source energy?
Is a great question. So I'll spend a second here for those of you who don't know the difference between site and source. So site energy would be basically equivalent to the energy bills of the project or whatever the project uses directly on site. Source energy includes that, as well as any losses from where that energy originated from the grid and from the power source of where that energy came from. So PHIUS's requirements are based on the source energy of the project. So we are trying to account for the grid losses and where that energy is produced originally. In our case, we are using a site to source conversion factor for electricity, which is looking at a national average for the United States. So we are using source energy though to determine that PHIUS zero with on-site power production. I will say we haven't seen many projects over 3 or 4 stories that have done PHIUS zero with only on-site power production. Oftentimes those projects are too dense and too tall. They just don't have enough roof area to do it with all on-site, which is why we offer the option to do off-site and virtual power purchase agreements and renewable energy certificates, et cetera, to help meet that source energy target.
Hey, James, and on the mention of that site to source conversion factor, I believe that's also been lowered as FIUS has updated to the 2021 version. Is that right? To recognize the grid becoming a little bit more reliant on renewable sources?
That is correct. So we did take a forward-looking view of what the current programs developed right now to help clean up the United States' energy grid are. So we're looking at, I think, a 2050 projection, 2050 projection of what our grid will look like based on the current grid incentives that we have out there to help pull that more towards renewables and less away from fossil fuel burning. So yeah, it is right now using the 1.8, I believe, is the conversion factor. So for every 1.8 units of energy used at the plant, that's what needs to get you to 1 at the site. So it's a little bit of losses there. And yes, it is fixed. And it's fixed right now for FIAS 2021 standard. When we do our standard updates, we typically update that number as well. I don't envision when we launch FIAS 2024 that we're going to make a significant change to this because I don't think the projections have changed very much for 2050 in the last 3 years or so. So that should be the factor that's used for the foreseeable future, and it is built into the into our software. So for the most part, you just have to open in the latest version of the Woofy passive software, and it will already have that source energy factor built in.
Great, thank you. I actually not seeing any more questions here in the chat. I was hoping there'd be more today, folks. Definitely jump on in with your questions. And reminder, if you want to, ask your question directly and talk to James, just use the raise hand feature, and you can unmute to go through it. We are getting a couple more in here, and James, you can see the chat here, so I'll let
Yes,
you
I can.
answer a couple of these.
Yeah, I will read through. So we got one from Mike. In some of our multifamily buildings, we have common laundry rooms with multiple washers and dryers. Does this type of room need any special attention to meet FIAS Plus? That's a great question. So most often what we're seeing in multifamily buildings at this stage, especially with the common laundry room scenario, is we still are seeing exhaust dryers in most of these facilities. And the biggest concern I think I would have for these is to ensure that there's makeup air provided for those dryer settings, because if all of those kick on at the same time, the potential to depressurize the building is pretty strong, and which we want to avoid, slamming doors and putting undue durability pressure on the envelope itself. So makeup air is a big thing that's typically provided in those common laundry rooms. The next question is from Vitor, and he says, does multifamily buildings need to comply with Energy Star multifamily new construction? The answer, I think, is any project permitted after June, might be July, but after June 2021 is required to comply with Energy Star's multifamily new construction program. Yes, sir. The next one is from Molly. How many buildings receive net performance bonuses? Is it a large percentage of FIA certified buildings? And this one, I'm not sure I know the
Yeah,
answer to this.
James, if you want to pause your screen share for a moment, I'm going to put mine back up here.
Yep.
For this question.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is referring to, I believe, these mass save incentives for multifamily buildings. There's incentives for certification, of course, that are between the pre-certification and certification are $3,000 a unit. But then there's also this net performance bonus. So I think the question is how many projects are receiving this? And yeah, James, I'm not sure if you would know this, as this goes through mass save. Luke McNeely was on the chat here. Luke, if you're still available, perhaps you might be the best one to answer this. Are you out there?
Yes, I am, and yes, I can. I will say that net performance bonus is a little bit of a confusing term. All projects receive a calculation of the net performance bonus, and typically it is below the value of a certification. And so as long as a project gets final certification, the net performance bonus does not play in. And so more typically, net performance plays in if a project, for instance, at the very end fails the strict pass-fail blower door test requirement. And then the net performance bonus is like a fallback. And typically we find that they average around 2/3 of the value of a certified project. There are a few rare projects that actually exceed the value of certification, and to date, we only have had one.
Great. Thank you, Luke. So I hope that answers Molly's question. Great. Okay. Any more? Let's see. I'm getting back to the chat.
I don't see any there. James, I'll ask one here. I know a lot of questions that I've been getting from folks out there in Massachusetts as this new code is going into effect. We know more and more multifamily projects are going to go through. Every town or municipality that opts into the specialized code will be, in those communities, multifamily buildings will be required to be passive house. One's 12,000 square feet or higher. So we know there's going to be more and more projects coming through. And there's been worries about what this means for the pipeline of the verification certification process. So I was just curious, James, if you could speak a little bit, from the PHIUS perspective on how PHIUS is, responding to those pipeline questions, and if there's any reassurance you can provide us that we'll be able to get all these projects certified.
Sure. This is a great question, Aaron. So yeah, in general, it is going to be a lot more projects. We are definitely expecting that, and we've been trying to do hiring to try to match that. I will say right now I have 10 reviewers working under me who are going through project reviews, and compared to this time 3 years ago, we've tripled in size. So we used to have 3, and now we have 10 below me, which is really helpful. I would say the other piece that we're really trying to ramp up and help with is on the opposite end of the spectrum of us reviewing the projects, is to help provide more helpful information for CPHCs and consultants and designers to help ease the front end of, not trying to handhold every single project throughout the certification process. I will also say that, over the past few years, we've seen plenty of projects in Massachusetts up to this point, regardless of the new stretch code and stuff. And we have seen lots of project teams excelling and doing a lot better job and making our lives easier when reviewing these projects. So it's kind of a help us, help you situation in terms of us developing our trainings and offering more trainings to help with those project teams to help ourselves also get through the project reviews more quickly. But yes, I do expect us to maintain these timelines that we've set for the past 7 years since 7 or 8 years since I've started at PHIUS. I don't anticipate we're going to have too much of a lag, even with the increased work, as we continue to help develop our internal staff to manage this work, and then help our training staff to make it easier for CPHCs to get their access to the knowledge without, having to go through every project review like it's a brand new thing for them to do.
That's great. I mean that the staffing up is certainly noticed. So that's great that you have, that many more people helping out with this and working on these this. There are a couple more questions now in the chat.
Yep.
So they're kind of related, so we'll do them at once here, but there's one about, do projects need aeroseal ductwork? So maybe a question on, look, what are you seeing for sealing ductwork? Is it aeroseal or other products being used? And then the second question there is there any type of, database that PHIUS might create that lists various systems and products? The question here is, reducing thermal bridging, but it could also be this type of sealing products for ductwork and so on.
Yeah, these are both good questions. So on the first hand, for the aeroseal of ductwork, we are sometimes seeing this, but this is typically a little bit of a last resort. I know that's a proprietary product that's used. For the most part, we're seeing a lot of projects with ductwork that they're doing their due diligence to start with, right? They're taping their ductwork. They're making sure that it's installed properly. We're only really seeing aeroseal, and for that matter, aero barrier, which is more for the envelope of the buildings, used as a last resort if things are looking too leaky, or if they're not being able to properly balance the system and they can attribute it to ductwork losses. So there are some other options. I don't know of any other proprietary things off of the bat. It's just more about due diligence and proper installation techniques for mechanical ducts more than anything else. And then for Keely's question, is there any talk about developing a detailed database for systems and products to work with for reducing thermal bridging, et cetera? There is. So we do have the PHIUS Alliance has been working on a detailed database. PHIUS itself has also been working on a details book that we're hoping to launch as a series of kind of online resources, and not necessarily a novel, a tome, you could say, for details. And from the products perspective and the systems perspective, we do have a panelized product program. We right now only have one panel that's been certified, but I believe we have 2 or 3 more in the process of going through the certification process, and they are specifically looking to reduce thermal bridging and looking at both commercial and residential application for those types of products. So yes, these are in the works and they're coming. The one thing I will say about any of these systems and all of this stuff, I know we're all still looking for that silver bullet to kind of like fix everything that we have with issues on every single one of these buildings. And I don't know if it exists yet, but it is getting closer. We are seeing lots of different manufacturers and products coming together to help alleviate some of these issues. And I do expect that we will eventually have, kind of a perfect package system that you can kind of take and apply to many buildings. I'm hoping for that sometime in the future, which would make all of our lives, including myself, easier.
Thanks, James. I'm going to take this chance to actually plug one of the presentations you helped us put together at the end of last year on various materials that are used in PHIUS processes, materials and mechanical systems. So this is a 2-session workshop. The videos are on our website, phmass.org, in our video library, but an excellent thing where you showcase the data on certified projects and what types of materials mechanical systems are actually using. So if you kind of want to see what different systems are being used, that's a good presentation to get a little bit of an idea there.
For sure. And I think that presentation that we put together was specifically for climate zones 4 and 5, which I think encompasses Massachusetts and some of the surrounding area as well. So it is super relevant, I think, to what you guys are working on.
Yeah. All right, folks, here's another call for questions here.
And in the meantime, Aaron, can I take back over and I'll share my last slide for CEUs for anybody who's a CPHC or a verifier or anything like that. And I do see there's another question already. Great. This one's from let's see. Navigate back to the chat. Khan is asking, will you be running training on hydrothermal modeling in WFI? I believe we will. We have not run one for a minute now. We do have that on the docket. I'll have to check with our training manager, Josh, to see when the next one of those is coming up. In general, though, we do already have the our hydrothermal guideline is listed on the website as a basically the standard for how you go through hydrothermal analysis in WFI Pro. So that is a helpful document, but obviously if you haven't used WFI Pro, it would be helpful to do a training itself. So I will check with Josh. I'm not sure right now when our next option for WFI training would be. I would just have to check the website basically to see upcoming trainings that are listed for the moment. And I will say in general, hydrothermal modeling it's complicated and helpful, and normally also kind of a last resort. Like we don't necessarily want to go into every project thinking, okay, I'm only going to have to run like 4 hydrothermal analyses on this building. We really want to try to limit those as much as possible and use some of the prescriptive requirements that are outlined in the guidebook under Appendix B, which lists our hydrothermal prescriptive ratios to try and stick to and meet where you can to avoid that kind of assessment.
All right, great. We do have time for more questions. If anyone out there has any, please let us know. Again, chat room, or you can just use the raise hand feature. We can unmute you. You can ask them directly to James here. Well, I'm not seeing many folks jump in here. James, thank you for putting this session together. And it's great to see PHIUS adapting some of these type of training specifically for multifamily buildings. I know here in Massachusetts, especially, we are going to have a huge increase in the number of these projects going on. So it's great to see this, and I know we'll be talking about all those projects here soon. Last question I see, are the slides available? We are going to be putting up a recording of this session, so the recording will be available. James, any comments on the slides?
I will definitely send them your way, Aaron, and I'll leave you to distribute. That's totally fine with me.
Great, thank you. They will be attached to the same page or the same registration site you went to for this course. We'll add the slides right there.
Okay,
Well,
great.
all right. Well, thank you so much, James. And thank you to everyone for being out there and attending today's Lunch and Learn. Please look at phmass.org for future sessions, and take care. Stay safe out there. Bye, everyone.